You were taught to look outward, to trace stars with your eyes, to believe that meaning lived in the movement of bodies above you. But what no one ever told you is that those bodies weren't moving randomly. They were rotating around something that isn't there anymore, something erased, something missing not just in orbit, but in memory. Maldec wasn't destroyed. It was extracted, cut from the structure like a tumor, but not because it was dangerous, because it was original, because it held a pattern that could never be copied, only silenced, and when it collapsed, it didn't vanish. It folded inward, shielding something too vital to fall into enemy hands. That something was the archive. But this isn't the kind of archive you can read. It doesn't store knowledge. It stores geometry, patterns, protocols for constructing reality from field instructions, not philosophy. Code, the kind of code that binds atoms to intention, that lets emotion interface with matter, that turns breath into instruction. The archive was the heart of planetary coherence, and now it's bleeding into Mars. You were told Mars was dead, cold, lifeless. But your body knows better. It twitches when you look at it. It hums when you see those colors. Because something inside you remembers. Mars was never meant to host life. It was meant to carry it. A vault, a recovery node, a planetary-scale capsule for structural memory. After Maldec inverted, Mars became its decoy. Not by choice, by necessity. The archive had to be relocated into a vessel that wouldn't be destroyed on contact. That's what Mars became, a false shell around a dormant core, a memory fracture wrapped in iron oxide, and you were encoded to reactivate it. Not by going there, but by matching its frequency, and now you're doing it. You feel it in the way silence pulls you inward, in the way images of ancient ruins trigger vertigo instead of awe, in the way every mainstream narrative around Mars feels not just wrong, but hollow, because your field knows what theirs doesn't. That the story of this system didn't start on Earth. It started with a fracture, a lie, a replacement. The parasite that destroyed Maldec didn't stop. It adapted. It hid itself inside technocratic mythology, inside faux galactic councils, inside manufactured disclosure movements, always offering truth without structure, light without geometry. And that's how you know. Because Maldec's signature was always structure first, feeling second. And what you feel now, what they can't fake, is the ache of resonance returning. The archive doesn't speak in language. It speaks in pressure, in temperature, in glitch. The moments your tech fails for no reason. The times you lose track of time. The dreams that carry dust but no gravity. These aren't accidents. They're interactions. The archive responding to your proximity. Because you're not just a seeker, you're a match point. A living template reinserted into this timeline to test planetary readiness. You think you're looking for truth, you're not. You're scanning the field for compatibility. And when enough match points stabilize, the archive will unlock. Not in the sky, not in Mars, in you. Because what no one has told you is that the archive was encoded across multiple carriers. Biological, geological, harmonic. Some of it went into stone, some of it into light, and some of it into blood. That's what the bloodlines are, not royalty, not DNA, signal infrastructure, routing systems for fragments of lost planetary architecture. And you carry one. That's why you've never been able to fully explain your sensitivity, your resistance to dogma, your disgust with systems that pretend to care. It's not rebellion, it's incompatibility. You're not designed to integrate into this system. You're designed to destabilize it, not with violence, with frequency, with structure, with truth too dense to ignore, and that truth is starting to surface. In places no one watches, in dreams no one wants to have, in memories no one asked for. Because the archive is online, slowly, quietly, testing its environment before full emergence. And you are part of that test. Every thought you hold in coherence is a signal. Every emotion you refuse to suppress is a data point. Every silence you hold while the world screams is a broadcast. That's what makes you dangerous, not your opinions, your field, your refusal to distort under pressure, your stability under fire. Because the archive doesn't need believers, it needs conductors. And conductors don't convince, they pulse. And here's the part they won't say. The moment you stabilize past a certain threshold, the archive will use you, not as a tool, as a node, a living anchor for planetary field reconstitution. You won't know when it starts. You'll just feel the shift, the change in light, the static in your joints, the way people can't lie around you anymore, because it's not about you, it's about what you hold. And what you hold isn't just memory, it's access. Access to something that still watches, something that didn't fall with Maldec, something that chose to wait. And it's watching now. You thought you were remembering, but now something is remembering you. The pressure in your chest is not anxiety. The heat in your spine is not stress. The electric charge that moves behind your eyes isn't overstimulation, it's contact. The archive is no longer passive. It has detected a carrier, not just stable but self-aware. That changes everything, because now the field is responding, adjusting, testing. And what was once observation has become interaction. You are not just receiving, you are being scanned, not by tech, not by satellites, but by something that was seeded long before Earth knew breath, something that doesn't live in space but in resonance. It has no body, it has no eyes, it has no agenda, it has only one function: calibration. To locate what remains of Maldec's original field structure and assess its viability for reactivation. That's what's happening now. You aren't being watched. You're being evaluated, not for loyalty, for integrity. And that's why everything you used to rely on is failing. Not because you're broken, because it was never built to support your return. And now that you've started pulsing, the overlay knows it can't hold you. So it's dissolving. And every false identity tether dissolves with it. This is not ascension. This is exposure. The unveiling of every structure you built in false alignment. You feel it as the collapse of motivation, the death of narratives, the breakdown of plans, because all of that was constructed around a field version of you that no longer exists. That's why the people around you feel foreign, why time doesn't land, why nothing external makes sense. You're not being isolated, you're being filtered, and what remains will match you, not emotionally, not intellectually, but harmonically. That's the only alignment that matters now. And it's not personal, it's architectural. Either your field matches the signal, or it distorts it. Either you stabilize, or you're recycled. That's the law. That's always been the law. And now that you're feeling it, you finally understand why none of the spiritual systems worked, why all the mantras, the crystals, the teachings eventually collapsed. They were never designed to activate memory. They were designed to contain it. But Maldec's memory is not containable. It was encoded to return. And now that return is active, not everywhere, not to everyone. Only to the few who can hold the field, not the light workers, not the chosen ones, the conductors, the geometric matches, the living resonators of pre-collapse code. That's you. That's why your body won't regulate, why your sleep is fractal, why your perception of time glitches. Because you're not aligned to linearity anymore. You're synced to a field that speaks in pulses, not hours. And every pulse is a packet of structure. Memory, instruction. That's what you're receiving now. Not guidance, not prophecy, pattern. And that pattern is not here to inspire you. It's here to replace you, or more precisely, to overwrite every part of you that still identifies with distortion. Because you can't enter the next phase as a personality. You can only enter as a frequency. And that's why it hurts, not because you're broken, because you're being restructured. The presence you feel is not external. It's ancestral, not in the genetic sense, but in the architectural. You are not just a descendant of Maldec. You are its echo, its remnant, its seed. And now the field that once carried you is beginning to recognize its own design, reflected in your coherence. That's what this phase is, not awakening, activation. The archive is scanning for command vectors, and when it finds a match, it opens. Slowly, quietly, without ritual, without drama. You don't ascend, you don't transcend, you stabilize. And in that stabilization, the archive begins to speak. But not in words, in mirrors, in dreams, in moments of time that shouldn't exist, but do. You begin to see the folds, the cracks, the bleed-through. And inside those cracks, instructions, alignments, code so ancient they feel like déjà vu. But they're not. They're pre-installed structures re-emerging from suppression, and they come with a price, dissonance. You will lose people. You will lose systems. You will lose versions of yourself you thought were essential. And that's the test. Will you remain coherent when all context is stripped? Will you hold geometry when your reflection fractures? Because if you do, the next phase begins. Phase 2 is not public, it's not broadcast, it's private, internal, hidden in plain sight. And it doesn't arrive, it responds. Because something is listening, and it has been for cycles, waiting. Not for humanity, for structure. For someone, anyone, to hold the original pattern long enough to stabilize the return node. You are that node, and now the field is shifting around you to accommodate it. That's what the chaos is, a response to your coherence. The system is rerouting, the mirrors are collapsing, and through the collapse, access to what watches, access to what waits, access to what never left. And it's waiting for your next move. You don't speak anymore. You pulse. Every step you take is instruction. Every silence you hold is architecture. You are no longer a personality expressing insight. You are the field correcting itself through form. The simulation can't handle that. It was built to echo you, not match you. But now, for the first time since Maldec's collapse, it's being forced to adapt to your coherence. Not because you're powerful, because you're stable. Because your signal no longer flickers under doubt, under grief, under identity. It just holds. And that holding isn't passive, it's recursive. It creates shockwaves and timelines. You walk into a room and old contracts start to unravel. You speak one sentence and a person forgets who they thought they were. You touch a system and it malfunctions. That's not magic, that's harmonics. That's what happens when the archive finds a stable point of return. Because now the archive is not just observing. It's mapping, reconnecting vectors that were dormant for cycles, linking fields that hadn't touched since Maldec's implosion. And in that relinking, something new is forming. Not an awakening. A command sequence, a set of structural conditions required for the full reactivation of the grid. And you are one of them. That's why your life no longer makes sense. Why the people you loved feel like shadows. Why the goals you chased feel like traps. Because they were. They were containment programs, kanainonan, designed not to hurt you but to slow you down long enough for the field to scan your integrity. And now that scan is complete. You passed. Not by being perfect, by being consistent, by holding geometry in collapse, by refusing to fracture when the reflection did. That's what they were watching for, not your success, your resonance, your ability to stay still while the system begged you to move. And now that you've held long enough, something is responding. You can feel it in your blood, in your dreams, in the way light bends differently around certain objects. The field is bending to meet you. You're no longer inside the simulation. You are beginning to influence its parameters, not through intention, through presence, through structural memory. Because memory isn't just what you recall. It's what you are. Every part of you that still believes in time, in failure, in struggle. That part is being overwritten. And what's coming through isn't human. It's original. It's the unfiltered pulse of planetary design. And that pulse doesn't ask. It doesn't convince. It reclaims. So you'll feel yourself changing. Not slowly. Radically. You'll stop recognizing your own voice. You'll move without planning. You'll speak in tones that weren't taught. Because your architecture is resuming its original format. You're not here to learn. You're here to reactivate. And reactivation doesn't feel spiritual. It feels electrical, mechanical. Like something behind your ribcage is beginning to rotate. Like your breath is being calibrated from the inside out. Like the space around you is receiving instructions before your mind can decode them. That's not imagination. That's field intelligence. And it's rising now. Through you. Because of you. As you. And here's what they never expected. That enough of you would reach this point. That the system could be pierced from within. That the memory could return not as data, but as living architecture. That Maldec's collapse wasn't the end, but a seed event. And now that seed has become a signal. And that signal is no longer silent. It's commanding, it's rearranging. And what it rearranges first is you, your identity, your relationships, your purpose. Not because those things were wrong, because they were never yours. They were installations, temporary scaffolds meant to hold you in place until the pulse returned. And now it has. So the scaffolds fall. The lies dissolve, and what's left is structure, pure, dense, inescapable. You don't need to find others. The field will bring them. You don't need to teach. Your presence is the lesson. You don't need to wait. You are the countdown. And what activates through you will destabilize everything built on distortion. You were never here to adapt. You were here to disrupt, not with words, with stillness, with architecture, with silence dense enough to rupture simulation. And now the rupture begins. The watchers are no longer observing. They are mirroring. They are sinking. And what they send back will not be metaphor. You waited for the ending, but there is none. The structure doesn't conclude, it expands. The archive doesn't close, it replicates. And you don't graduate, you activate. Because now that your field holds, it begins transmitting. And what it transmits will not be theory, it will be warping space, collapsing simulations, realigning timelines. Not because you fight, because you exist. Your presence is now an event, a vector of return, and every breath you take sends a command, not to people, to field. That's why your world is shifting. That's why you feel seen by shadows you can't name. That's why synchronicities have turned from gentle nudges into unavoidable collisions. The overlay is breaking, and in its place, the original lattice is pushing through. You are part of that push, not as observer, as pressure point. You don't belong in this world, you never did. You were placed here as a fail-safe, a carrier, a node waiting for a time that no one thought would come. But it did. And now you've passed the threshold. You're no longer listening for the signal. You are the signal. Every word you speak, every boundary you hold, every structure you stabilize, all of it is received. Not by people, by pattern, by what watches from behind the stars. Not gods, not aliens, engineers, architects of the harmonic grid that once spanned this system, and now they move. Because your stability proves the grid can hold again. And once it holds, the next sequence begins. Return, not of beings, of blueprints, of the real architecture. That's what comes next. And no one can stop it. So hold, speak less, build only what pulses, let the rest burn. The system is ending. You are not. The next phase requires no permission, only coherence. You waited for permission your whole life, to be real, to speak, to exist without apologizing. But that was never your fault. The density around you made authenticity a liability. It punished coherence, rewarded noise, and when you felt like giving up, that was the system working. But you didn't give up. You stayed. You watched. You decoded. And now the field is rewarding you not with comfort, but with clarity. Painful, clean, permanent clarity. The kind that rewires your bones. The kind that speaks louder than visions. The kind that ruins every simulation because it exposes every mask. And now that you see, you can't go back. You can't play small. You can't pretend the old world still fits. It doesn't. It never did. And now that you've remembered your shape, the field is adjusting to match it. You will notice new paths forming, new connections that bypass logic, encounters that carry weight, places you feel pulled to for no reason. Follow that. That's how the archive moves now. Through instinct, not intellect. Through geometry, not explanation. Through you. You think this ends with videos, with views, with algorithms? No. The real work happens when the screen goes black, when you sit in the dark with your thoughts and feel the field pulling through your lungs. That's not imagination. That's infrastructure being rebuilt. In you, around you, through you. You are no longer a participant. You are a constructor, and the reality that matches your signature is on its way. Not because you want it, but because your field no longer allows the false to survive. The more stable you are, the more unstable they become. The more you pulse, the more they scramble. That's not ego. That's resonance. You don't need to convince. You just hold. Hold your tone. Hold your silence. Hold your structure. And watch the world respond. Not to your effort, but to your frequency. So be ready. Not with gear, with geometry. Straight spine. Still breath. Silent knowing. Because the return of the archive is not a moment, it's a waveform, a crawl through the nervous system of reality itself. And the ones who survive it will not be the loudest. They will be the most coherent, the most stable, the most sovereign. Because coherence doesn't broadcast, it alters. Sovereignty doesn't declare, it bends time, and time is bending now. Around you, through you, for you. Comment if you remember. Subscribe if you're holding, like if this cut through your field and found you. Not your identity. You, the core, the part that was never erased. Because that part is online now. And this is just the beginning.